All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the T&E Committee. If it wasn't announced, sorry to be starting a little bit late, if it wasn't announced earlier, I wanted to let you know I had pushed back the beginning of this hearing by an hour to allow council members to attend the retirement ceremony for Chief Manger, who's leaving us, unfortunately, after 42 years in public service. It's still going on, but the deliverable is where the county executives decided to rename the public safety headquarters the J. Thomas Manger Public Safety Headquarters, very nice. Which was very good news today. Okay, so if you haven't been in these before, it's traditional at the beginning of a term to begin a term with briefings for the committee to update us on the workings of the executive branch, and it's especially important this year with a new DEP director and new committee members here. So not only today, but later on next week, we decided to begin this term with briefings on solid waste today, and then next week on stormwater management and on climate, three of the big vexing issues before not just DEP, but other agencies and the county council as well. So today's the first one on solid waste. We're very eager to hear what the executive branch has been doing, what questions are in front of you, and we're very eager to welcome for the first time our new DEP director, Mr. Ortiz. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's great to see you. Is that what this button is?
Yes, it is.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here.
Be closer.
And it's a pleasure to be in the room with so many activists and supporters. So I want to acknowledge everybody who's invested in the environment, which should be everybody, but I know we have a lot of leadership in the room. And Mr. Chairman, we're going to go through just sort of a 30,000-foot overview of some of the stuff that we're working on, and we can get more in the weeds, pun intended, on whatever the committee desires. There's a lot of stuff happening in this field, and as I've been saying recently, we're expecting nowadays 2020 or 2030 results on recycling and waste diversion on 1990 models. So this is a really exciting time in our work. This is a pivotal time to really do recycling and waste diversion 2.0. Internally, as some of you know, we've been developing a reorganization that we'll be presenting to the county executive later this spring, and one of the things we're going to be doing is renaming the solid waste division the Division of Recycling and Resource Management, because we want to acknowledge that all the material that's coming through the stream is material of value. It's not waste, and we should treat it as such and be efficient, because the taxpayers deserve nothing less. So we'll scoot through. There's a whole bunch of stuff, but again, we're going to give an overview. We can drill down or have follow-up meetings on or offline, informally or informally, as we need to. And also, many things are in development, so we aren't quite at decision points on a lot of things, but we will be shortly. 4 big things we're going to cover. The recycling system, which is a substantial decision point that we're coming through soon. The aiming for zero waste plan, which will also inform the way that we're going to take our infrastructure into the next generation. The Goody landfill, I think everybody may know, but if not, that we have 2 closed landfills, the Goody landfill and the Oaks landfill. The Goody has seen some challenges, but we can get more details about that. And finally, one of my favorites is food scraps. More than 30% of our waste stream, actually about 40%, is organic material that has value that we want to recapture, that we don't have the ability to do so. One of the things that we like to use as a guide is the waste hierarchy developed by EPA. Some version of this inverted pyramid comes up a lot, and this is really what an ideal system looks like. At the top is prevention, also known as source reduction, where we're trying to take materials that are not recoverable out of the system, and even materials that are recoverable to prevent them from going into the system, so our pie is smaller. Preparing for reuse, which also is reuse, is resources that go into taking materials that do have value, that don't need to be processed in some way, that could be cleaned or refurbished and put out on the streets. Thrift stores are good examples of this, but thrift stores can also be salvage good home stores like a Community Forklift or Second Chance in Baltimore that doesn't require a lot of processing on the government side. We're all familiar with recycling. We're lucky to have a dual stream system here in Montgomery, one of the most mature in the system. Other recovery, there's other forms of recovery, including waste to energy and other systems. And then finally, disposal. Disposal tends to be landfill or material that we don't capture any sort of resource from. So this is the way that we want to start thinking about things. We want to put as much resources into the top of the inverted pyramid and as few into the bottom. So the recycling operation was launched in the 1990s. There's been a lot of debate historically about a dual stream versus a single stream system. Right now, dual stream is proven to be the wisest because of activities taking place nationwide and internationally in the markets. And we can talk more about that if you're interested. But the system overall is over capacity. About 40% of the material that's coming into the system is actually diverted out of county to Pennsylvania currently, taking our recycled material. 40%. So for those of you who may not have been there, the facility is at the transfer station at Durwood, Shady Grove area. It's actually a very thoughtful system. It's pretty customer friendly. You can drop off a lot of material there. That's also the site of the transfer station where material goes to the Dickerson incinerator, and also where the recycling facility is. However, the recycling portion is undersized. There's just too much material coming in. So the county executive has charged our department with figuring out what to do next. So we're looking at three alternatives. The first is to upgrade the existing facility on the existing footprint. The second is to look at leased space in one of the industrial areas in the county. And the third is to look at a vacant site and build out for the county. They all have their pros and cons. At this point in time, today, we're not ready with a recommendation for the public, but we've been working internally and with a consultant to evaluate the pros and cons of all the options. The county executive is very interested in making a decision this year, and why this is, and we have money in the budget for improvements, $25 million in capital for improvements. Why this is important isn't just for the recycling stream itself, but in terms of a systems perspective, and I encourage us all to think of this as an entire system. So we as the government are responsible for the waste stream of the county. That's a lot of stuff. It's 600,000 tons through the transfer station and 400 through the recycling and composting.
The recycling material, the recyclables is 77,000 tons of materials in the recycling in the MRF. The MRF is receiving 75 to 77,000 tons of material between commingled material and paper. Composting, we're receiving at the transfer station between 90 and 100,000 tons of yard waste material. About 60,000 tons are going to Dickerson to be composted and create leaf grow. And the rest is being grinded and sold as mulch, untreated mulch, from the transfer station to the end destination.
And forgive me, I failed to introduce our division chief, as you probably suspected, Willie Wayner. So a lot of material is going through the various systems, but I encourage us to think of it all as a system. So by we're going to talk more about food and offline. I've spoken to, I think, all of you about our interest in food composting. Mm-hmm. And that by moving pieces around the puzzle board, we may be able to create, facilitate that infrastructure sooner.
Councilmember Reamer has a question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. When you said that 40% of the stream is diverted to Pennsylvania where it's processed there, and when you've talked about we're sort of out of capacity, is what you mean like taking these materials in and then preparing them for market? Is that basically where we are out of capacity? Is how do you take all the glass and then do something with it so that you can then sell it to somebody who's going to buy it? And when we don't have enough room to process all of that, is that what you mean when you say we're essentially out of capacity?
Yeah, so that's the processing, and the processing is the separation and the baling of the different commodities. So that's glass or paper or plastics,
So
And
we're
then,
shipping commingled stuff to Pennsylvania, where that's then,
Go ahead.
Okay, so from the material, the incoming material we're receiving at the material recovery facility, from the commingled side, which is the system that was first installed in 1991, it's a system that can process about 8 tons an hour of material. So basically on a particular day, you can process from 60 to 65 tons of material and bale it and send it to the end markets. We are receiving from 130 to 120 to 140 or 50 tons a day of material. So what we're doing at this point is we signed an agreement with the processing facility in Pennsylvania. It's called Penn Waste. So a portion of the material that we cannot process at our facility is being reloaded into transfer trailers and being sent to this facility in Pennsylvania to be processed as recycling and sold. We don't get that revenue. They get the revenue, but they charge us a rate just to process the material.
But it is important to note that everything that people are trying to recycle is getting recycled.
yes.
There are some communities that are not recycling everything they used to recycle because of the market conditions, which I've noted in my packet. But the county, partly because of our dual stream process, we can meet lower contamination limits than some other jurisdictions can. And despite the fact that we have this overcapacity, everything ultimately is still getting recycled that's intended to be.
I read that as so important. I think we should come back to that topic because we need to talk about how to get the word out. I think people are already starting to think that they shouldn't recycle as much because it's not getting recycled. So we gotta help people know.
Yeah, Evan?
I don't want to disrupt the flow of the presentation, but on this point, I attended a meeting, I attended MACO back in December, and talking about environmental stewardship within the counties, and particularly the recycling programs, there was an expert who lives here in Montgomery County who actually said that we should restrict the amount of items that we recycle. And you're saying that that's not something that we should do?
Now, the county's position is that we maintain and continue to do what we do for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, Montgomery County's environmental leader is just the right thing to do. So the overall carbon footprint of reusing plastics, for example, is just going to be better than using virgin materials, and likewise for paper, for that reason. Secondly, nobody wants to invest too much in predicting what markets do, but it's hard to imagine that the markets are going to get any worse than they already are getting. Third, people are doing the right thing, and I think we want them to continue to do the right thing. And in fact, we want to be more prescriptive as we go with greater ability to divert more materials and put into reuse. So people have already made the behavior change, and we're reluctant to disrupt that behavior change.
I regularly tell my husband, I think he throws too much in the recycling bin because I didn't think we could recycle it, but it's good to know that we can.
Well, we want to recycle the right things.
Right.
So, we don't want people contaminating stuff, so, but we're.
Point. Okay.
Yeah, but we're happy to provide an educational intervention in your household if needed.
On this or on everything?
We're going to restrict it to
I might need to participate in some of that, but thank you, okay.
We could do a committee site visit. But there's, downloadable materials on your website about which plastics to include, et cetera, right? And you do mailings consistently, right? To inform the public, especially, Ms. Cow, right? Every time the potential universe of recyclable items is expanded, right? And to your point, Adam, I think, it's safe to say human behavior, as hard as it is to change government procurement or move the private industry, the hardest and slowest thing is changing human behavior, right? So once we have people recycling, it always takes a while for the habits of the public to catch up to whatever mechanism we're trying to get them to do, and you wouldn't want to go backwards at all. Is that all accurate?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I do want to speak to the markets because there has been a lot of stories about how, to Keith's point, some jurisdictions apparently are deciding not to recycle some materials. Like all like all industries, there's market disruptions, there's market corrections, and this one is no different. So paper comes up a lot. For decades, China has been buying our paper to cut down on their on their need to cut down virgin forests. They closed the gate on us on paper, which of course set the price spiraling. But an outcome that hasn't been received a lot of attention is that now domestic pulp mills are processing that material. And a number of them are converting from processing virgin material to now processing recycled material, which is more sustainable. And I've been hearing, and I've been asking for more information, that I've heard that more than a dozen pulp mills are now opening domestically here in the United States. So again, it's a market correction, it's a disruption, it's a little costly. Another thing I think that's helpful in thinking about is, we have the responsibility as the government of processing all this material that's set on the curb. We're sort of the recipients of a disposable consumer society. That's a big responsibility and a whole lot of stuff. And we have to be mindful to do it, to take a long-term perspective. And we're on a 1990s model. But as more sophisticated as we come, we can get more value out of stuff. So I think it's helpful to think of things in different commodities as price per ton. So the price per ton of sending material to the incinerator is $46.60. So that's actually a pretty low price overall. Recycling is in the high 30s, low 40s now, even in this distressed environment. But if we compare it to disposal, we're saving money. Composting is closer to zero. We're about breaking even. With some tweaks and reforms in our systems, I think we could be even more revenue positive. So although recycling is distressed, it's still better than disposal on economics. So we're spending a lot of time on this. But the decision on what to do with the next generation of the recycling facility could create other opportunities. So hypothetically, if we move it out of the transfer station, we could do food processing there or some other type of diversion there. So moving along, so this is our waste composition study. I just put this up there, and I know it's very small print, but I'll just give you some shortcuts. More than 40% of what's in our waste stream is organic food. Almost 20% are recyclable other materials. So there's still a lot of material in our waste stream that we aren't getting to, even at a recycling rate, around 60%. So there's still a lot of value in our waste stream. I'm going to talk about Goody, and actually I'll defer to you, Willie, because you're a lot closer to the project than I am.
Yes, so as you know, Goody landfill is going under remediation project, and we've been working on the design of this remediation project, which is to basically cap the top portion of the landfill. The side slopes are not being capped because the vegetation is very dense in there. There are trees already and a lot of vegetation, but the top of the landfill, about 110 acres, are going to be capped just to reduce the amount of infiltration, water infiltrating into the landfill, and to be able to extract more methane gas from that landfill. We are right now at a 30% design. We're going to be at 60% sometime next month. The consultant is presenting their plan for the 60% design. And we are planning to send out the bids for construction beginning of next year and start the project, I say here, is later on in FY20, fourth quarter FY20. So that is very exciting. We are also looking into, well, first of all, you probably heard that we had a few problems with our flare system at that landfill. And so we, through the people that are actually monitoring that flare system, we requested an assessment and a quote, and we're ready to move on with the upgrading of the burning system on those flares to burn. It's going to be a big upgrade. These flares are almost 18 years old. They should have had an upgrade already, and they didn't.
Remind everybody what methane flares are, please, and what causes them. And
What? Say that again.
could you jumped right into methane flares. If you could, for all the millions of people watching at home, remind everybody what methane flares are, what causes them.
Okay,
cetera.
so the flares are, it's a system to extract the methane gas from the landfill, basically, and avoid the methane gas to just emit through the air. This system, it has a blower which actually puts a big vacuum into the landfill and extract these gases. And then they are taking it to a stack, basically, where they're being burned. These systems need to get upgrades every so often. And I think that the reason why they were not updated on time is because we were running a separate project to create electricity at that site, which was stopped because of it was impractical. The amount of electricity that we were generating there wasn't making it financially viable. And so we stopped that a couple years ago. And now is the time to reassess and upgrade these flare stations. So that's what we're doing right now. This project will be completed sometime in May of this year. And we are also looking into the possibility of relocating this flare station into another area of the landfill once the construction project starts.
Great. Thank you, Willie. So we'll talk a little bit about the zero waste planning effort. So this is, there's a committee established I know many of you are familiar with. We've been meeting, and soon we'll be seeing a draft version of the report. Again, this is the goals that we've been talking about maximizing waste reduction and diversion, good economics, good environmentalism. We're looking at the system as it exists now, its strengths and its deficiencies. As I mentioned, it's a very strong system relative to others, but there's certainly a lot of improvements, a lot more capture that can take place. We're benchmarking against 5 jurisdictions on this continent that are seen as leaders. So Minneapolis, Kings County, which is Seattle, Austin, Toronto, and San Francisco. San Francisco and Seattle are often talked about as having the highest diversion rates in the United States, so we're curious to examine what they do and see what we can do better. So we have a lot to learn. I've also asked them, it wasn't in the scope of work, but I've also asked the group to provide some guidance internationally. Europe is doing a lot of interesting things as well. They have very vastly different systems in some ways, but it certainly doesn't hurt to look. So as I mentioned, we're moving along. So once we've diverted as much as we possibly can, so we're at Montgomery County's hovered around 60% diversion for some time. The goal, as we've all seen, is 70% at the end of the decade, which is upon us shortly. And then the county executive has expressed that he wants to get our diversion to the same amount of ash that we're currently sending from the incinerator, which would be a diversion rate that would be in the 80s, which is ambitious, certainly ambitious. So we've also asked.
Explain that again, sorry. The executive said that to get the diversion rate to the same amount of ash, what does that mean exactly?
So currently at the incinerator, about 600,000 tons approximately per year are being processed through there.
Right.
It's incinerated, it's converted into energy, there's ash that's created.
Wants to divert the same amount that goes into the incinerator so that the incinerator theoretically under that doesn't have anything more to take in essentially, or you're neutral, is that what you mean?
Yeah, so a comparable amount of material that we're disposing is equal to what's being taken out of the incinerator. So when the material is burned, of course, it breaks down to approximately a third of the mass of what the material is going in, which is about 180,000 tons. And then that material is taken to a landfill in Virginia. So the county executive has expressed the goal that we want to get our total disposal of everything to be about 180,000.
Okay, so no increase of landfilling, essentially. Is that another way of saying it?
Yes, yeah, exactly. But that's a very high amount, but still, we have to figure out what to do with it.
I want to say, I think that's the right position, that we shouldn't landfill more, but I don't know how you're going to get there. I really don't.
Can you describe, when the climate working group, when we set the goal of getting to zero carbon by 2035, for example, and the climate working group worked out, what does that really look like, as radical as it sounds? What kind of vehicles are we driving, what kind of buildings? What does meeting that goal look like in solid waste terms?
Well, the term is zero waste, so it's the same terminology. Quite frankly, nobody has gotten there. And the roadmap is a little unclear once we start looking at about 5 or 7 years into the future. That's why we're investing so much time into this zero waste planning process. We received a briefing last week about the status of it from the researchers. We've been pretty impressed with the array of things that they're looking at, and to see how close as we can get to the county executive's goal. It would require a mix of strategies. Some of it would be better and more diversion. That includes more that we can possibly do at the consumer level or at the curbside. It includes technology, being able to sort better using updated optical sort technology. It includes policy, so are there more materials we can take out of the waste stream, period? So we've banned styrofoam here, as you all know. But there's other materials that, single-use materials in particular, that are worth looking at. And then are there incentives that we can provide to consumers and businesses to do less? So pay-as-you-throw has been talked about a lot today. That's a system that's been used in a handful of jurisdictions in the country and throughout the world. Those things may get us there. Are there changes in the constituent material of the stuff that we're using every day that could be compostable, and not end up at the landfill in Virginia? I'll admit, like I think anybody in this administration would, we have a lot of hard thinking to do, and we'll have to think out of the box. But it's no question a worthy goal.
Great, thank you. Didn't mean to take you off track.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Conversations are ongoing. Food scraps, this is, so we talked a little bit about sort of, in conceptual terms about what may or may not be possible in the future. But what I like about food scraps is that it's very possible. Around 40% of the waste stream is organic material. That's material that could be processed into a compost product with pretty modest investment in technology and infrastructure. This is an area I'd like us to move to right out of the gate. So this is something that we're looking at this year. It would require some infrastructure to do it on a large scale here in the county. Currently, organic material is being sent to Prince George's County's organic composting facility in Upper Marlboro. They have recently expanded their facility and they're accommodating our material. There's money in this year's budget to focus on commercial food diversion and send more material down there, which we're excited about. But in the long term, talking about our system and our assets here, we want to figure out what would work here. And there's different technologies that we can use to provide the infrastructure. What's good about owning the infrastructure is then you control the asset, and then you control the pricing, and then you control the whole business model from soup to nuts. And I think that's probably what we'll be recommending as we get more in the weeds. I can talk more about technologies if the committee's interested. Then there's also policy and practice on the front end. How do we capture the material? Is it set out to the curb? Is it countywide? Do we pick it up with yard trim? do we require businesses and restaurants to do that, to set aside that material and divert that material? So that's all stuff that we can look at. But I think that that is a step with relatively modest investment. We can take a big step to zero waste. Yeah, I said all this stuff. You know, this is the beginning of a conversation. I'm excited to be part of this conversation. This is a really, really exciting time for this work. As those of you, and many in the room have known me for some time, I welcome a robust dialogue. I welcome ideas. We're very transparent about what we're doing here, and we're really excited to take Montgomery County to the next level.
Thank you very much. Very helpful. I know my colleagues have questions as well. But so let me ask you. I know we recently funded a position in DEP focused on food waste. Has that been filled yet?
I believe the ad is still on. It's been advertised, and we're going to be moving into interviews shortly.
When do you expect it to be filled?
A month and a half from now?
Optimistically, a month and a half from now.
About in yeah, month and a half, 2 months from now.
Okay. Process. Can you comment, either of you or Ms. Cow, feel free to join us too, on the first of all, biggest generators of food waste? How much is commercial versus residential? How much within commercial, hospitals, large businesses, small businesses? Any sense?
So in the strategic plan for food waste that we completed last year, we identified, there are 2 waste characterization studies. The one that we were working on the information we had available when we were creating the strategic plan, and a newer one that was released later on. But in both waste characterization studies, we identified more than 110,000 tons of food waste that is generated these days in Montgomery County.
That number again? How much?
110. Well, it's over 110,000 tons.
Right. Okay.
So from that number, if my memory is correct, about 70,000 tons of that material is commercial, and there is about 56,000 tons of residential. Is it right here? 51. Mm-hmm. Okay, I was close. So 51,000 tons per year are generated at the single-family residences, 17,000 at multifamily, and it's over 70,000 tons per year at commercial.
Great. And how are we doing? Can you comment on how we're doing with facilities, well, sources that we have some control over? So MCPS, Montgomery College, the hospitals, utilities, other folks that we come into contact with quite a bit.
You want to comment?
So we are working with the major generators of food scraps. What we've done is we've really kind of dissected and put together the estimates of how much each of the organizations or businesses would be expected to generate in terms of food scraps. And actually, we've been working with them and trying to encourage them to set up on-site programs to separate their food scraps and send it for recycling, processing into compost material at this point. I would say that the biggest choke point, the biggest obstacle right now is the dearth or lack of facility capacity to process that material. We are also working on that. As Adam mentioned, currently what is separated and goes for processing, the vast majority of that material does go to the Prince George's County facility. We are working, we've been in conversations with Prince George's more and more and trying to get sort of more of a commitment in terms of how much additional materials generated in Montgomery County we could actually direct to that facility. But in the meantime, what we're doing is we're also trying to get more specifically informed about the commercial generators, especially the larger generators of food scraps. So we developed a survey instrument and we've sent this out to the first, kind of the top 2 priority bands of the what we think are the largest generators of food scraps. And really it goes through and asks them to give us more information, more specific details about the food scraps that they generate. What do they do to minimize, reduce the waste of food scraps to begin with, whether they channel food that's in excess of their needs to others for reuse in its natural form. And then if they do separate their food scraps for recycling, what do they do with it and where does it go and how much of it goes there? We're also asking them about cost, if they would please share that with us as well. On the flip side, we're asking them about their solid waste for disposal and getting that same information so that we can really get more informed and see, because one of the other things, priorities for current fiscal year, trying to secure processing capacity for food scraps, trying to work with these generators, especially the major generators, to help them separate their food scraps and send it for recycling. We also are looking at whether or not we need to put into the works inducements to encourage further the separation and recycling of food scraps. And then on a separate note, we also have in this current year, we're creating basic information for our residents. You know, what is this food scrap recycling all about? Because it's a little bit different than reading your magazine and putting it in your recycling cart, or finishing your soda and putting the can into your bin. So trying to kind of have all of those as our first priorities this fiscal year. But first and foremost, we're working with the major generators.
When do you expect the results of the survey will be back and you'll have them analyzed?
So they are coming in, and right now we're going through a process of doubling back. For those recipients of the survey link who have not yet begun, we're reaching out individually and trying to encourage them to go in and give us that information. We're also, as we are getting results, we're reviewing it, and when we have questions, doubling back and getting more information. We expect, we hope, we anticipate to have results tabulated in the month of April.
Okay. Are there any of our larger generators, especially in the public sector, that are doing a good job now of recycling their food waste?
Yes.
Who would those be? Could you tell it what's happening with the MCPS or the correctional facility or Montgomery College?
Let me see. We are working actively with Montgomery College because they have a high level of interest in setting up this type of program. Let me see. The universities at Shady Grove, they have a program, and we are working with them to enhance and improve their program. I would say at this point, they're one of the, in terms of major generators, they're becoming a better and better model as we work together and implement best management practices that we've developed with our experiences, and we're helping them to implement as well on campus.
Does their waste go to the digester then?
I think so. The Western Branch.
Okay, wait a minute, here we go. I'm gonna have to double check. I believe it's going to the Prince George's County facility, but I'd have to double check.
Whose waste does go there?
Whose materials go to, I mean, pretty much all of the generators that we've been working with are going there. For example, Whole Foods. Whole Foods used to have a really good program. It discontinued somewhere in the last 5 years. We've been working with them since 2018 to try and reinvigorate their program. They kicked it back off January of this year, and their material is going to Western Branch. So I would say the vast majority, it's just I want to double check before I say for sure where it's going.
If you could get back to us with maybe some of the best examples, and so right now there's no sort of pilot program in certain schools in MCPS or any other facilities that we have some influence over to?
Right now, the big pilot program that we have is our own pilot over in the EOB, which really, we don't call it a pilot anymore. It's just become a permanent base.
Good practice, okay.
Yes, and we have the best management practices. We use our cafeteria, the Wellbeing Cafe in the EOB, as a model to share with these other businesses that we're working with. And we've taken that to other locations as well.
Are the scraps from the Wellbeing Cafe here included?
Yes.
Okay.
And in the Public Safety Headquarters building.
Okay. I know we got a briefing on Tacoma Park's food waste program. Any lessons from that and any ability to scale that up?
Actually, Nima came and gave a presentation, an updated presentation recently to the Zero Waste Task Force, and we sat in on that. I mean, I think that there are always good lessons and tidbits to learn from each other, and, you know, certainly we did get good information. In terms of scaling up, you know, it is a very different scale. So we're looking at different elements in terms of pre-planning for the future potential for curbside pilot here in Montgomery County. So of course, we're going to be taking their experiences in Tacoma Park into account
Right.
as we do that.
Okay, let me see what is on the mind of my colleagues.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yesterday, Tuesday evening, the transition team officially conveyed recommendations over the last few months of work, some of which has been made public. I have the report printed out, and I thumbed through issues related to this. And would love to hear a little bit more about particularly the pay-as-you-go model, and at least at this point in time, how you envision that being rolled out, if it is something that you plan on doing.
Yeah, thank you. Great question, and it's actually come up a lot in the last 24 hours.
I bet.
It's a great concept because it incentivizes recycling with people's pocketbooks. It's one of the things that's being looked at in the Zero Waste Task Force. There's about 30 things that they're reviewing and looking at cost-benefit analysis. So how much does it cost to implement, and then how much pound of diversion do we get per dollar or ton per dollar from that investment, and then how implementable is it, how practical is it. Those are things that are that we're serious about. We've been in the last few days trying to figure out what jurisdictions have a pay-as-you-throw program at scale. We've heard a lot about them being done in small places where it's kind of easy to control, and we're getting that information. There's different systems, and I know you're curious about it. So at this time, we're not sure if it's implementable here, practical here, but some systems involve a sticker or a ticket system where homeowners have a booklet of tickets that they put on every bag, stick on every bag, and then they only have so many a year, and then they have to buy more. Other systems involve a designated type of bag that's sold at sort of a premium, so that incentivizes that way. And other ones are simpler, that there's just simply a smaller trash cart for people to fill, and then recycling is bigger. There's challenges with all of them. And some of the bigger challenges I hear that it makes collections people open up and count bags and make sure that they're stickered. Is it rocket science? Probably not. Would it be a substantial change to our operation? Probably. Is it worth it? We'll figure it out. But we expect to have the results of our Zero Waste Task Force study later this year, and we'll talk about it at length.
I acknowledge the merits of a progressive fee scale, such as you've outlined, but in a jurisdiction the size of ours with 1.1 million people and a beautifully diverse socioeconomic residential community, I fear that sometimes such progress, a progressive schedule might become a regressive schedule as well. And as we look at laws and regulations through a racial equity lens, which we are all committed to doing, I just want to make sure that we're mindful of that as you move forward.
Yeah, that's noted. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And then I too am intrigued regarding the food waste and the composting. Is it easier to start with the commercial sector or start with the residential sector?
Prevailing wisdom says the commercial sector, and but generally the breakdown is pre-consumer or post-consumer. Post-consumer, people have already touched the food, they've already eaten it or half-eaten it, and then there's more possibility of contamination. So people putting plastic forks or material that can't be composted in it. And then there's smaller quantities to pick up from more places, generally. Willie mentioned single-family, the breakdown between single-family and commercial. Commercial, it's pre-consumer, so it could be a restaurant that takes all the scraps and puts it, before it mixes with other material, or it could be a grocery store that, maybe a percentage of the produce is not good for the shelf. So generally, commercial, which is generally pre-consumer, seen as better.
Okay. And then we had talked about the global trends within recycling within this space. How quickly do we need to pivot? Or is the national economy, as you mentioned, the reopening or starting up of new mills to accommodate the changing economics? What do we have to do differently, and how quickly do we need to do it? With regard, it could be said that we need to do things differently, and I agree within this whole space, right? With global warming and all the changes we need to be mindful of, but specifically within the recycling.
I think there's a tremendous sense of urgency because we're not, there's more that we can do for the taxpayers. I think the longer that we have a system that isn't diverting as efficiently as it should, we're not using people's resources as well as we possibly can. So I think there's a sense of urgency in that sense. Could we continue along the way that we have been for some time? Of course we could. We are now, but the cost is that we're diverting 40% of the recyclables to another state entirely for profits and revenues that somebody else is getting. I could go on.
I agree with you regarding the urgency, and we need to be creative, and we need to see what has worked in other jurisdictions comparable to our own. And I look forward to working with all of you in that effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam, you've got a real, this is an issue you know well, and we're glad that you're here to take this on. So you've got a great team working with you, and I know you're going to move the ball forward in a big way. First thing I want to go back to is this issue of people, what they're hearing in the news, how we can communicate with them. As Tom said, there is material on the council website that, tells people what's recyclable, but have you seen any evidence of any decline yet in recycling yet, or anything like that that sort of signals the problem, or is it more just what's in the air? Because I can just tell you, just based on the barrage of stories, thanks to my meeting with you that I had a week ago, I now am, my faith is 100%, in our system, but I was starting to wonder, like, what's going on? Do I really need to dig that bottle out that someone put in my trash can and put it in the recycling, or should I let it go? And I'm a dig it out person, but not everybody is. So if people are starting to worry that this stuff isn't working, recycling is not happening, they're not going to go the extra effort. How can we tell, our residents, like, we're on track here. Everything's getting recycled. Don't slow down. Do you have you had a sense of what the tools are at your disposal? I think it'd be worth just reemphasizing, if nothing else, some emails to the newsletter lists. But yeah,
If I may, that's absolutely right. Actually, beginning last fall, when the first rumblings of other jurisdictions looking at whether or not to continue with certain elements or aspects of their recycling program, we proactively anticipated that same word would, would reach our constituents, our residents, our businesses. And so we started issuing releases and blogs and tweets and website information, electronic newsletter information, listserv blasts to our email lists to tell folks that we continue our recycling program here in Montgomery County continues strong due to the higher quality of our recyclable materials that everyone is putting into the bins. We are marketing successfully our materials, and they are being purchased and made into and used for other products. So we put the word out, stay the course with us, please continue to recycle, and we restated our commitment to recycling. Given some of the news yesterday with another jurisdiction, we're going to continue that and actually probably should put out new information again, because as you mentioned, Mr. Reamer, it sometimes gets out in the air. We can tell from our askdep.com questions, we can tell from the tweets, we can tell from when we are at the many educational events and community events that we're at literally every week, from questions that were posed, that people do wonder. The great thing is they care very much about recycling, but they do wonder. And so, we want to proactively get that word out so that there is no doubt and so that there's no slippage or hiccup in what people are doing here in Montgomery County.
Well, what I would like to, I'll serve the tennis ball right back at you.
Yeah.
We're happy to prepare some information for tweet and social media. if
Yeah, that'd be
you'd
helpful.
interested.
I mean, we might want to consider, like, we could do a community event, we could have the county executive and council members, gather for something just to, I think the news would cover it. I could see your evening news coming out to say, Montgomery County leaders want you to know, like, we're not slowing down here. We're on track.
Yeah, and one thing that's special about, among the many special things about Montgomery County, but one is the dual stream system.
Yeah.
So the paper is cleaner, and we're getting more of a premium for paper, which is something that other jurisdictions.
People should know that their extra effort is paying off now.
Yeah.
I mean, a few years, not that long ago, there was a widespread industry-led push to go to single-stream recycling, right? Is that dead?
I have not.
Is it dead in Montgomery County?
Oh, it's certain. I think it.
I've always been a great skeptic of it.
Well, just to refresh memory, so there was a point in time when it was sort of, everyone was jumping on that kind of idea and bandwagon. And you may recall that in 2007, 2008, 2009 timeframe, we had internally gone through what I call war room exercise, and we went through every factor in decision-making in terms of, do we stay the course on dual stream, or do we start to, also think about turning the tide? And with that war room exercise, we made the conscious decision to remain dual stream. Not that we had a crystal ball, but we definitely did due diligence in all those aspects, and it's turned out to be really fortuitous, given the global market changes, et cetera.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, for a while, it seemed to a lot of people that single stream would result in more recycling. That you're making it easier for people. I think that was sort of the thought pattern, but, that's not the case, I guess. You don't end up recycling more material. You probably contaminate and have to discard as much as you may gain in additional volume. I don't know. But regardless of, the diversion rate issue, it seems like the quality is a major factor right now. So
It's huge.
it's a sort of a different angle on it, but a really important one.
And you're adopting as a cost to the county through the contractor, the free behavior we get from all our constituents now when they separate, right? I mean, I toured the facilities where you have to pay all these people to separate the stream coming in, and the less of that you have to do, the more you're getting from your taxpayers for free, the lower
We should be
the
thanking.
costs are.
We should be thanking our.
Absolutely.
We should,
we should-
their tax form should get like a.
We should thank them every day.
Your rebate, what the taxes you're not paying, for less valuable material. Because every time you make that effort, there's a payoff. Okay, so to the issue of the overall strategy for increasing recycling and reducing the amount that goes into the incinerator. Again, I want to say I agree with the county executive's position that we should not embrace more landfilling. That's just inherently bad. And so, in order to shut down the incinerator while not also adding more into landfills, you must increase your diversion rate and your recycling rate and your composting. You must get those up to essentially, I don't know if I want to say unrealistic, but sky-high rates. What rate do we have to get to, do you know yet, of recycling in order to get the waste going into the incinerator down to that 180,000 tons so that you could actually shut it down?
Yes, of course, the rate is really high. Right now, we are at a recycling rate of 56% plus the 5% diversion rate that we get from the activities the recycling activities that we have in the county, which puts us a little bit over of 61%. In order to get to that goal, we've been just doing some calculations, and the rate that we need to be at is over probably 84%.
Over 84%.
Of recycling.
Okay, so that means that 84% of the stream is recycled? Is that what that means?
Well, it is complicated because you're talking about, are you talking about just municipal solid waste, which is what the state assumes for purposes of our recycling rate? You have construction and demolition debris that is not considered municipal solid waste, but you don't want to landfill that either. Some of that is being burned at the incinerator now too. I did a calculation in the packet. The number I came up with was about 76.6%.
Where's that?
That's on page 4 of the packet. But that's sort of the good news. The bad news side of that is that within the current recycling rate, we get credit from the state for our ash, which is beneficially reused after the burning of the trash for lining of landfill roads and things like that. If you take the ash recycling credit that we get out of that, we're at about 41.9%, excluding ash. So the 41.9 is what equates to the 76.6.
Okay, just to be very simple, the reason why you would take it out is because
You
it's
wouldn't
actually
be-
going into a landfill,
Well,
right?
no, also, if you're taking the incinerator offline in the future, you won't have the ash anymore. So you can't count it in one calculation and not count it in the other. So the equivalency is, we're at a 41.9% pure recycling rate of MSW on the front end, and we would need to be at about 76.6% on the front end to get that equivalent reduction that you were talking about. And these are sort of order of magnitude. There's a lot of puts and takes in this, and like I said, this assumes that you are not landfilling any additional construction and demolition debris. So that's another 60 or 70,000 tons a year. So there's a lot of puts and takes in this, but so these should not be considered exact numbers, but it gets you the order of magnitude that you're looking at.
Okay, so in order to move the ball towards that, we're going to need some aggressive proposals. We're going to need proposals, pay as you throw, other things that you've highlighted. You know, there's no way to get to that kind of behavior change without a lot of initiatives. So
You're looking at like a very robust food waste diversion program plus many other things.
Right.
all right, so we will send them over.
Stay tuned.
All right.
All right, we good? Well, welcome to the job. As you can see, there's a lot of interest in this topic. You have a great team. You have a lot of decisions in front of you. We have a budget on our desk that's going to, including yours, that's going to occupy us for the next couple of months. But I know you don't have all the answers today, but I think we'd welcome another briefing after the budget, like in June, and would love to hear about more progress on a lot of these fronts.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the engagement of all of you and the other members of the council. This is a really exciting time. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of good feedback. So we have a great team here. We've got a lot of ideas the community does. We really look forward to engaging more and figuring it out.
Terrific. We really look forward to working with you and to all our advocates that have joined us today, too. We have a great and very robust community of advocates around this topic in particular, and we're eager to hear from their recommendations as well, as I know you are. Okay, well, thank you all for coming today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.